I would like to introduce our next speaker. She also cares deeply about the infrastructure layer of your life. Her main focus right now, she is one of those amazing polymaths. I really love her. I met her last year because I too am a polyglot polymath, like dancer, technologist, social impact person, refugee person, all the things. She is also that kind of person. She's been a filmmaker, she's been an artist, she's been in IT, she's been in the university system. She is a very rich and complex individual. And one of her core fascinations is how do we understand how the world works so that we can make it better, and specifically, how do we improve the operating systems and the infrastructure of our world? Currently, she is essentially working to use, dun dun dun, blockchain. Who here knows what blockchain is? Who here could describe it really effortlessly to a 5-year-old? Okay, case in point, why you should be listening to this talk. Shermin Voshmgir, yes, is going to tell us about blockchain. She is the director of the Research Institute for Crypto Economics in Vienna, and she is a spectacular woman. Please give her a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you all for staying here. I know it's been a long morning, and so for all those who've stayed or come back, I value your interest. We will spend the next 15 minutes or so talking about how we can use blockchain technology and the power of incentives, economic incentives, to program a more sustainable world. But before we get into sustainability questions, the question is really what this technology is. Now, most people think Bitcoin is a currency. It really isn't, that much at least, right? For me, Bitcoin and its underlying blockchain technology is an operating system for a new type of economy. It's an operating system for a new way of society to organize itself, and we'll get into that. B, it's a transparent bookkeeping tool, and we'll get into that too. And C, it's a new asset class. So what does it mean, an operating system for a new type of economy or a new type of society? If we look at the world today, we're organized in this top-down manner. All our organizations, small or big, are organized top-down. We have one central legal entity that has a name, that is probably registered either in a company register, or it's an NGO, or it's a country, so you know what that organization is. And it's organized top-down. It has this one centralized legal entity, so you know who to sue. And its agents are controlled or managed, or their relationships are managed through legal contracts. In the case of organizations, it's employment contracts, and organizations within each other have contracts that regulate how they interact with each other. Now, Bitcoin has introduced a whole new world. It has introduced this operating system that allows us to organize ourselves in this super decentralized way across jurisdictional boundaries. We have a distributed network of autonomous actors who do not know and trust each other, who most likely live in different countries, and most of the time do not speak the same language. And they do not have one central legalized entity that runs it. And they have no employment contracts or contracts in any way, shape, or form regulating how they work together, except for the code. And that is a big game changer. All the rules of how Bitcoin works and what stakeholders you have, what roles they have, and how they're incentivized or disincentivized, the whole behavioral rule sets, the governance rules of how Bitcoin works, that peer-to-peer money machine, is in the code. The code is transparent. Anyone can download it to their computer and start being part of that decentralized Bitcoin network. And transactions are not validated through one centralized entity like a bank, but everyone has the same piece of information. So when a transaction is made, it's validated by consensus, majority consensus of all network actors. But how do we make sure, and that's the big game changer, how do we make sure that all actors behave according to the rules? We incentivize them. We incentivize them with Bitcoin, the fastest, what we call miner. The miner is a validating node, the fastest validator to validate a block of transactions that has been made in Bitcoin is rewarded with a few Bitcoin. And we all know that the price has been rising, so it's worth quite a lot of money. So that reward mechanism, the crypto economics behind it, makes sure that this network is attack-resistant and fault-tolerant. That's the backbone of how a distributed network of actors who do not know and trust each other can interact in a trusted manner without being attacked. Now, the math behind it, the cryptography combined with the economic incentives, with the game theory, that's quite complex. But the magic thing of Bitcoin is not that it allowed us to have peer-to-peer money. It introduced us through the back door with one thing, and it's the magic and power of incentives. Because Bitcoin has been up and running for years, and it's never been, the network itself, it has never been compromised, in spite of the fact that it doesn't work like a traditional organization. Now, this is quite powerful, and this power of incentives has inspired many other projects. And it's not so futuristic, and Bitcoin is not the only project that is using the power of incentives. Ever since Bitcoin 9 years ago, a lot of people took that code that's open source, modified it, forked it, and did their own better, faster, more anonymous version of Bitcoin. And we've had many so-called alternative currencies emerge, trying to play with this kind of crypto-economic incentive mechanisms. Okay, next, transparent bookkeeping tool. Why is that so important? Well, that's important because this is how the crypto economics also works, which means that everyone has the same information, every node in the network, every computer has the same information. And why crypto economics? Because cryptography makes information transparent to all, while preserving the privacy of the individual behind it. And the economics, the game theory behind it, makes it expensive for people to manipulate the network. Because I could try to pretend on my computer, as you see the one on the right with the X, to manipulate the data on my computer. But that doesn't help me. If I do a transaction and I try to send you 10 Bitcoin, but I only have 1 in my wallet, well, the rest of the network will know that the information is not true. And this is the power of transparency. Now, what does that mean for sustainability? It means that everyone has the same information. Today, we live in a world of siloed information, where we have data monarchy. So we really don't know along the supply chain who did when and what. But in this new transparent way of distributed data, we can have full transparency about who did what and when, and we can have supply chain transparency in order to know, is it made in Norway? If it says it's made in Norway, is it fair trade, if it really claims to be fair trade? Is it organic, if it claims to be organic? Today, we have to trust centralized institutions who go ex post and verify samples, whether they're really fair trade, whether the seal they got at some point from one centralized institution makes sense. Okay, and the third thing, a new asset class. What does that mean? Bitcoin is also a currency, but not only. It's also the fuel of the network, because you can't only mine Bitcoin and then send it from A to B, but in order to use the network, you also have to pay transaction fees. So yes, it's a currency, but it's also the fuel of a network. It's kind of a utility. And on the other hand, so it's peer-to-peer money, currency, it's the fuel of a network, and then it also has the speculation aspect. The more people, and this is the power of networks, contribute to the network, and the more people contribute to making the network stronger, more resilient, the more it will be worth. So, down the line, after Bitcoin, the biggest game changer was Ethereum, because they came and they all of a sudden made it very, very, very cheap to create your own currency without having to program your own blockchain. With Ethereum and everything that was inspired by Ethereum, we now have the possibility to create, with a simple smart contract, our own token, our own currency that can do anything from incentivizing you to reducing CO2 emission reduction or planting trees instead of cutting trees, etc. The problem here is that while on a network level, the game theory is very rigorous. We have so-called proof of work in Bitcoin and many other blockchains, and it's a proven attack-resistant mechanism, thank you, mechanism to ensure that the incentive system is sustainable and the network is sustainable for the purpose it's built, and the purpose in the case of Bitcoin is peer-to-peer money. Now, unfortunately, when Ethereum came along, it was a blessing on one hand, but at the same time a curse, because now it allowed us to create tokens with smart contracts without having a security function behind it. And we have seen, over the last 2 years, ICOs, peer-to-peer fundraising mechanisms over the blockchain have allowed many teams to raise funds for their own tokens that had purposes, for example, purposes like sustainability purposes, and we have managed to raise billions of US dollars or euros in cryptocurrencies for several projects, and this trend is going upwards. 4 billion just last year for ICOs. And we have 1,600 so-called cryptocurrencies or tokens listed on CoinMarketCap today, and the trend is going upwards. But the question here is, how can we use the power of incentives, what Bitcoin taught us, to program a more sustainable world? How can we unfuck the world by making money? And so this is the question we asked ourselves at the Blockchain Hub. And we realized that really, it took me 3 years to realize that Bitcoin was not about peer-to-peer money or crypto economics, all fine. It's really redefining value creation. We live in a world where this capitalist world, and we talked about capitalism versus communism a few times today, and I think we need to understand that the whole concept of value creation is flawed, and this is why this capitalism versus communism debate doesn't work. And doing good versus doing money doesn't work. We're never going to solve the problem on that level. And we now have a tool with which we can solve that problem, because we can now redefine, maybe, if we do it right, we can redefine value creation. What do I mean? In the world today, if you're the owner of a production facility to create paper cups, you will reap all the benefits, all the profit margin from that is left after you produce these cups minus the cost that you have for producing these cups. The profit margin is yours. It's privatized. So you're actually incentivized to try to externalize all costs possible. Creating paper cups, it may be better than plastic cups, I don't know, but the ecological footprint is gigantic. Nobody cares. For you, it's a business model, right? And with Bitcoin, we can redefine this. Bitcoin has introduced us through the back door this new type of value creation. Bitcoin said value to society was post-economic crisis. It would be valuable for us to have peer-to-peer money without banks, because banks are a unique point of failure. So we want to create peer-to-peer money. That's the goal of Bitcoin. How do we do that? We create this consensus mechanism behind it, economic incentives that are designed in a way where everyone runs into the same direction just through a certain lines of code that have been defined once. So what if we take that principle and create an incentive system for a CO2 coin, where we incentivize people, where we say our aim or our value for a group of people is to reduce CO2 emission. And we want to incentivize people. So everybody can opt into that system. And every time you can prove with your app or your Fitbit or whatever that you walked instead of taking the car, that you took the bike instead of taking the car, that you took the train instead of taking the plane, you get rewarded with CO2 tokens that are mined the moment where you prove that you've done that. So that sounds very powerful, and we can do the same thing, for example, with a jungle token or a tree token. We can design a system where we incentivize people for planting trees instead of cutting trees, etc. The problem is that design is very complex, and if we look at what currently is happening in the token economy and what people are doing, and we did that, we analyzed over 100 tokens, especially in the sustainability field, to understand what they're doing and if they're doing it right and to find best practices. What was the result after 3 months of analysis? Well, first of all, when we say sustainability, as Seth also mentioned, we have a set of sustainability goals that we can look at, and there are many of them. And basically, they summarize in social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability. So we saw that a lot of teams are trying to do something in the sustainability field. 50% of the teams are in the energy sector, and 50% of those are maybe in the peer-to-peer energy sector, and the rest of them are mostly in the remittance sector and the access center. But when we looked at those tokens, we saw that yes, a lot is happening, but no one really knows what they're doing. We looked at the white papers, we looked at the landing pages. Mostly they just have crappy landing pages, some more or less sophisticated white papers, and we figured out that there is from among those 100 tokens that we've analyzed, there is no best practice. Most tokens don't have an incentive design. They're not inspired by what Bitcoin is doing, by incentivizing network actors for a certain behavior that's single purpose. It's just most tokens, it seems, have been designed to just raise money. And I don't want to say that these projects are fraud. I think that many people saw the power of that technology, and it's very powerful, but they don't really know how to design tokens, so they did whatever. And they, regardless of that, raised money because nobody really knows what they're doing because we're so early on in the game. So to wrap it up, the state of token design for now is a total fail. So even we didn't expect much, but we didn't expect that it would be so bad. And what we're trying to do now is that we're entering the era of token engineering. We're trying to figure out this new type of value creation, how to define value, how to engineer these tokens to incentivize sustainable behavior. And we still lack best practices, but we are collecting best practices from across many industries to figure out how we could design such token systems. And unfortunately, as of now, we also lack modeling and forecasting tools because it's complex behavioral economics combined with game theory, etc. And then you need the right governance tools to make it sustainable over time. We're not there yet, but at the Blockchain Hub and at the Institute for Crypto Economics, where I'm working also now, we're trying to make this happen. One last word. When we talk about blockchain today, and incentivizing sustainability, for example, we cannot talk about blockchain without talking about AI. We cannot talk about blockchain without talking about IoT, because where does that information come from? If I want to measure that somebody actually walked instead of taking the car, it comes from an IoT device, it comes from a mobile phone, and can I trust that data that is being collected? And how do we measure sustainability? And what are the metrics? How is the AI? And do we have reliable metrics to program sustainable behavior? And very often, the answer is no. So we're at the very, very beginning, but this is what we're doing now. We're currently having projects with the city of Vienna to design a token that incentivizes sustainability with the Austrian Development Agency and possibly also with the Ministry of Sustainability and Tourism. And we're working with a few startups that are also active in this field, Changers, Africa, Green Tech, Good, etc. summing it up, I have 15 seconds left. I think 2018, we will, first of all, hear more about the token economy and tokenizing real assets, but we will also hear more about token engineering and mechanism design. This is a completely new science. We don't always have to reinvent the wheel, but we have to pull the scientists from multiple disciplines to make this happen in a meaningful way. And if you're interested to find out more, go to our website, Crypto Economics Research Institute in Vienna. And for more learning resources, you can go to the Blockchain Hub, which I founded 3 years ago. OK, so thank you for your attention, and let's go and enjoy the sun.